Potatoes are as satisfying to grow as they are to eat, and here are a few things to keep in mind as you begin planting potatoes this season. But first, let me tell you a story. I grew up in my father's garden, and about 10 miles north of us here in the Finger Lakes, and we always grew potatoes, and we always grew some in rows in our garden, but we always grew some in a big half wine barrel that was cut in half, full of soil, except that it wasn't full of soil. We'd fill it about half, 2/3 with soil. We'd plant our potatoes, and then all throughout the summer, we'd throw in compost, we'd throw in more soil, we'd throw in grass clippings, we'd throw in straw, and at the end of the season, that wine barrel would be full up to the top, and my sister and I could heave that wine barrel over, and soil would come spilling out, and lots of different colored potatoes would come spilling out, and it was always such fun. Easter egg hunts are great, but when you get to push over a wine barrel full of multicolored potatoes, it's pretty glorious as well. So here are the things prescient of that story. We planted them, we only filled that wine barrel halfway. And that's because potatoes only grow from that seed potato above. And so they don't even produce potatoes on that same level as that seed potato, and certainly not below, only above. So that's why you want to plant them as deeply as possible. / you can always put more soil and compost, other materials on them throughout the season, and that will encourage. Tomatoes and potatoes are the only two plants that when you bury their stems, those stems will become roots. They won't rot, they'll become roots. They'll be able to extract nutrients from the soil, and they'll be able to grow that much larger. So all season long, we plant potatoes as deeply as possible, but we hill them as well. And so here at the beginning of the season, we have our seed potatoes, and seed potatoes are special potatoes. They're just potatoes, but they're seed potatoes because they've been certified that there are no crazy diseases on them. Preferably they're organic as well. And from here you want to note that you want 2 eyes to be growing out of any given potato that you're going to plant for seed. And even if they're small, if there's more than 2 and there's more than 4 eyes, you can very effectively cut it in half. And you can see this is a glorious purple variety. It's called Magic Molly. But here is 1 eye, here's that second eye. On this other piece, here's that 1 eye, here's a second, here's a 3rd one, in fact. So these potato pieces are perfectly fabulous to plant. I've effectively made 1 potato into 2, and I'll double my harvest. And another thing about this, now that I've opened up, you can perhaps see how shiny that potato is. I want to let it heal over for 2 to 3 days. And I want to basically let that wet, moist edge become matte, healed over, so that when I plant it in the ground, it's less susceptible to bacterial, fungal diseases. And I've also let them green sprout. And that means I've actually let them be out in the sunlight for a few days, for a week, and these sprouts would have been very up close and barely noticeable before I put them in the sun. If I left them out just on my counter, they would become long and narrow and very weak looking for sun. Those wouldn't be good to plant. But here, because they've had a direct exposure to sun, they're nice and tight right alongside the tuber itself, and they're ready to explode out of the soil and grow a very vigorous potato plant. So when I'm planting them in the field, we dig a trench, and it's about 1 foot deep. We plant them every 6 inches in the trench and bury it. In a container, which potatoes grow marvelously in containers, make sure your soil is awesome, full of nutrients. Make sure that it's a large container. This is a 4-gallon pot, and that's a minimum of how big a container I would be looking for to start to grow seeds, to grow potatoes in containers. And so from here, I'm going to plant them every 6 inches in the soil. Here's another variety. Oh, look, this one has already been healed over beautifully. You can see instead of being shiny, instead of being shiny, it's nice and dull. And that means it's healed over not susceptible to disease any longer. And so I will fill this container with potatoes every 6 inches in a grid, and I'm going to cover them with just a few inches of soil. And that is to get them started. And one of those eyes will become its primary root system. Another one of those eyes will become its primary leaf and shoot system. And from there, I'm going to pat them down so there's good tuber soil contact. And yes, this is not full. Yes, I am walking away. And yes, in a handful of days, I will see those potatoes begin to emerge. And once they're about 8 inches tall, I'm going to cover them halfway with more soil, with more compost, with deciduous leaves, with straw, with grass clippings. You've got lots of options. Whatever you do, make sure that you're covering those stems with something so they are inspired to turn into roots, so they're inspired to make even more potatoes for you. So there you have it, friends. I can't wait to show you our fields of potatoes growing and some other tips on how to hill them and other strategies. But have so much fun planting your potatoes this season. And if you have any questions, I'll see you on the forum.